Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Maul.
And welcome back. We're going to get the college football week 1 review underway. For some teams, it's week 2, namely those 0-2 like Florida State. So,
yeah, just preface, if you're a Florida State fan and you want to just like get along with the gripe, tune on in. If you don't want to hear it and you're tired of hearing it, just might as well just tune out right now because you're about to catch it all episode.
or if you're like the guy that promised to eat dog poop out of a solo cup, just go ahead and scroll on by and act like it didn't exist.
Find that, man.
It's going to be bad. All right. How we're going to do this, we'll just go through the top 25, sort of like we did last year. I think that worked sort of well. Is we'll go through the top 25, especially this week since it's week 1, teams that we still think sort of that our opinions on them, and we'll continue to whittle it down until really it's who are the 12 teams making it into the playoffs. So, at least this year, we'll have to talk about Vanderbilt,
Can I just say, like, before we get in this, like, and I think people who have watched it have known, like, I've been pretty steadfast on this point. The fact that, like, we continue to have preseason rankings, like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's mind-boggling that, like, the entire season gets predicated on these numbers in front of teams before the season even is played. And, like, don't get me wrong, as human beings, like, we're thinking about who's supposed to be good. Like, everybody thinks that Georgia should be number 1, right? Whether that little number 1 is there or not, you're thinking they're number 1. So if someone came out and beat them, yeah, it would be like a big win. But, like, for Florida State, I'm not going to lie. Like, I hate being wrong, but I'll admit, like, I picked them to win the ACC. I think Pops did too.
Yeah.
Right? I think you were the only one that didn't. Nick Saban picked them. I think Desmond Howard picked them. Like, a bunch of people picked Florida State to win, right? Why? They were undefeated last year, right? They got a new quarterback. They got Mike Norvell. The ACC didn't really get any better.
Did they get a new quarterback?
Well, yeah, I mean, they did. But, I mean, but what I'm saying, though, is, like, it influences the rest of the season with, like, this preseason ranking, right? It's number 10, and you're thinking, like, okay, yeah, they should be good. And then they go out and lose to Georgia Tech, right? And you go, okay, clearly Florida State's not that good. And lo and behold, this is easy saying it after week 1, but I said this after week 0 when I was like, what are we going to do? Go and rank Georgia Tech now? And what are they, number 22?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so we did, right? We went and ranked Georgia Tech. And don't get me wrong, like, Georgia Tech looked fine in that game. But it was like, Florida State is awful, right? And it's not even like it's a one game, like, oh, that was just a bad game. They're going to bounce back. Like, clearly, now we've got 2 episodes of it that they are just an awful team. They're bad up, offensive line, defensive line. Defense can't stop anybody. DJU can't hit the broadside of a barn. Like, they're a terrible team. So, was Georgia Tech beating them significant at the time? Yeah, sure. But because they were the number 10 team in the nation, we're going to look back and Georgia Tech's going to be like, yeah, remember when we beat Florida State? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, Florida State is clearly a bad team. Like, sorry. Like, these preseason rankings, though, start off from the get-go of, like, it changes the way we view wins, and I just don't like it.
The same logic, though, that you're using, like, just I want to sit back and agree with you in terms of we rank Georgia Tech. Clemson gets demolished. Now, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, it's Georgia. I'll get into that in a minute because we knew that was Clemson from last year. There's no difference in the team that we saw last year on the field from Clemson to this year. But it's like, the same matrix that were like Florida State lost to Georgia Tech beat the number 10 team, Georgia Tech's ranked. Why is Boston College not ranked? Clemson falls all the way down to number 25. Boston College is sitting right on the outside. And it's like, so what's the difference between Boston College and Georgia Tech? Like,
I go one step further and go, what's the difference between Clemson and Texas A&M? Like, Texas, I mean, I don't think Texas A&M is, like, great, but, like, that was a good game. They went all the way wire to wire with Notre Dame, right? And Notre Dame's what, like the 7th team in the nation, right? But Texas A&M falls out of the rankings. Clemson gets absolutely blown out. And don't get me wrong, I get it was against Georgia, but like Clemson didn't look good at any point. At least Texas A&M looked pretty good at some points of the game. They could have won, right? But like, why is Texas A&M unranked? Just because they started lower in the rankings and Clemson started higher, therefore they, like, what's the difference there? That's the thing that gets me, is like, what makes any difference? You go, oh, well, they lost to Georgia, the number 1 team. Okay, Texas A&M almost beat the number 7 team. Like, how is that really that different?
Well, this is why, we were talking about this off camera, why the NFL is like perfect in the sense that it is, like, in terms, no matter how good a team was, because the team I brought up to you was like when Randy Moss and the Vikings were just running through teams and everyone was like, I want to see them play the Broncos. But guess what? They got beat by the Falcons. No one that year sits back and goes, the Vikings are the best team in football. No, they go, Broncos won the Super Bowl. Like, it's no matter what else happened, Broncos won the Super Bowl. Yeah, you can complain, say whatever you want, but that's the best team that year.
Perfect example, like the Chiefs. Everybody's calling for a three-peat. They're the best team, and if they come out and lose a bunch of games, it'll be surprising. But guess what? If they do lose a bunch of games, they don't make the playoffs. Period. Dot. It's not like, oh well, we think they're the best team still. They'll still go to the playoffs. It doesn't exist. Sorry, got to win the games. Like, and that's what
college needs to change to adapt.
Yes, and it's not that I don't like. At some point, there does need to be rankings, but like we need to see all these teams play games and play real games, not against Western A&M Tech or something, to like really judge them. Because like we'll talk about it, but like perfect examples: Alabama and Texas. Are they good teams? We think they are, right? But when your quarterback only throws 9 passes in the entire game and you win 63-0, like. I'm sorry, like, I didn't get a good read on them. I don't know how good they are.
Correct. And the issue is that then you start trying to get down to the top 12 teams. And it's like, this is why, if you go back, the BCS system was great from that perspective, because it was like there was no human subject. Now, there was subjectivity in how they built the computer system.
Yeah.
But in terms of it being exactly what you're talking about, like, oh, well, I think that they're the better team. Like, that went out the window. There was not this like human element, which is the committee. Because we talked about this last year, and I can already see it coming down the pipe. Like, if you think that after the top 5 conference champions that it's going to be a clean cut picture, dude, it is going to be absolute chaos.
Especially when you have like 7 10-2 SEC teams.
Well,
like, how are you ranking those guys?
A perfect example is, because we were talking about this, like USC now. Like, here's a team that I know we didn't think were going to be good at all. Beats LSU. Now, they don't have to play Ohio State. They have to play Michigan, and they have to play Penn State, which is their really big games in the Big Ten, in Washington.
Yeah, and then Notre Dame at the end of the season.
And Notre Dame at the end. Let's say that they lose to Penn State, and let's say they win out. So they have 1 loss to the record, but let's say Penn State plays Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, and USC's left out. It's like they only have 1 loss. So, let's say that now Penn State loses to Ohio State, so they have 1 loss. It's like you now are going to have all these 1-loss teams that really, like, not through their own failure. USC didn't play Ohio State. That was Big Ten scheduling.
Yeah.
Like, that's not their fault. They also didn't play Oregon. So when you have multiple 1-loss teams sitting there at the end, whether or not they have a conference championship or not, like, that's where I sit back and I go, watching how the committee plays this shell game of rankings throughout the season, especially once the committee starts ranking teams, I'm telling you, like, I'm going to see the conflict. I know me and you, I'm going to be upset, visibly, emotionally.
And you made a great point the other day too, when you're talking about like playing in the conference championships, almost going to be a bad thing, right? Like, and that's just silly when you think about that. Like, yes, it gives you the ability at that bye, but at the same time, like in that perfect example, if USC doesn't have to play in it's
a bye week.
It's a bye week, right? Like, they're getting the bye anyway, because you're not going to leave a 1-loss team out like that, of that caliber. and they're getting the bye week anyway, and then they don't have to get exposed in the conference championship or even lose that second game possibility.
And then if you're a one-loss team that doesn't play in the conference championship, but now you're ranked the higher seed, you get a home game, home playoff game. Now, we've talked about, like, for some teams, it's really going to be a huge advantage. Like USC, if they can get back to where fans, like in 05, where it was the thing to do in LA was to go. But like I sit back, I don't care what anyone says, like school out or not. Any game in the SEC, like, can you imagine if LSU was to like win out, but they don't make the top 4? Baton Rouge, like for a playoff game, you probably will be able to smell the liquor from Atlanta. Like that place will be unreal. But that's, I look forward to it, but I agree with you. The rankings, we got to get away from it. Because all it is when you really break down, well, how do rankings happen? Well, it's just writers. Like, look at writers and how they rank high school recruits. Like, how many times are they wrong?
Yeah, because we're stuck in this AP poll thing. And then we don't even use the AP poll, right? Like, at the end of we wait until the end of the season. There's a reason they don't have the college football playoff rankings until the end of the season or, like, the last, 3 or 4 weeks. You know what I mean? Like, and that's how it should be. Let's play some games. Let's see some teams develop and kind of go throughout the year, and then we'll start ranking them, right? Get rid of this AP top 25 stuff. Like, I don't care. That doesn't mean anything other than, you can just say you beat the number 10 team in the nation to open up the week. Sorry, Florida State's, we already talked about this. They're going to be, lobbying for a 64-team playoff by the end of the season.
Correct. There's no difference in me and you giving a top 25 and some writer down the street. Now, people, I know that's bold to say, and people are going to be like, well, that dude does it for a living. It's like, I'm sorry, but there are plenty of people out there that watch enough football that everyone's like, hey, that game's not going to go down like you think it's about to. Like, and it works out every year. Like, yeah. Anyways, let's get down on football. Week 1. So we'll start with the top team, Georgia. Initial thoughts.
Obviously, beating Clemson as bad as they did was great. I don't think they looked as dominant as they have been in the past. And that's not to take anything away from Georgia. It's just that their past few teams were just so dang good. They look beatable. Like, against the right team, I think Georgia is beatable. Carson Beck didn't play super great. Their defense was not as good as they have been, right? So, it's hard to say. I'm nitpicking at this point. They won that Clemson game on pure coaching and just discipline alone. At least the first half. It wasn't a great first half, but there were multiple examples in that game where guys were just staying home and playing disciplined football. And based on the way everybody else has been playing, that's going to go a long way this season on just being a better coached and better disciplined team. They're clearly, better than most of the teams in the nation. I think there's going to be some teams that can give them problems, but you're going to have to show up and play a very disciplined full 4 quarters in order to beat them.
Since 2021, who's the only team to beat Georgia?
Alabama.
I like what Saban said. Until someone outside of Bama shows they can beat Georgia, Georgia's the clear-cut number 1 team.
Clearly.
The thing, do I agree with you? Yes, Georgia looks sloppy in some instances. The good news for Georgia is week 1. I sit back, and for me, Georgia's the clear-cut number 1. Now, but I want to, it's going to sound tongue-in-cheek. It's because of how good Georgia looked and the other teams didn't show that much. At the same time, I also want to go tongue-in-cheek by saying Clemson's bad. We knew this last year. Think about it. DJU lost his job to this guy.
To Klubnik.
And Klubnik has not looked good. This
bad.
is the team that went out opening week last year and lost to Duke. And everyone, but it's this perception. That's the problem. It's last year, Duke's a good team. They lose to Duke. And what does the polls immediately do? Duke must be good. But no one wanted to sit back and go, Clemson's bad. Yeah. Clemson's not a good team.
Clemson's been not good for about 5 or 6 years now.
Correct. And so it's one of these ones I'm not trying to take anything away from Georgia. Georgia did exactly what we expected them to do, which was handle Clemson, because we all sat back and went, Clemson's not a good football team. Clemson's overrated this year. The fact that they were the number 13 team in the country, I was like, you're kidding me. Like, they're not that. I sit back and I look at Georgia. Georgia getting ETN back will be a help. The thing with Georgia, and this has always been Kirby Smart's, I feel like, downfall, they've really struggled on offense, like with explosiveness. They have a good running game, but like from a standpoint of like wide receiver, like don't get. And what's nuts is like you sort of sit back and you go, dude, they had Brock Bowers, they had Lad McConkey, like they've had Adonis Mitchell, like they've had guys at positions that you're like, this offense should really sort of be, I would say, more Alabama, more of a high Texas type of offense.
What's the reason Stetson Bennett can win back-to-back national championships and was not even like really in the conversation for like a Heisman or anything like that? You know, like they don't have that. And I don't think they have it in Carson Beck either.
No,
like he's fine. Don't get me wrong. Like he's going to do fine, and he's exactly what Georgia, you know, can have out there and still just dominate. But he definitely isn't. I heard it. It's always the bias, right, that just gets you. Like, I don't have a problem with Georgia, but I heard the announcer during the game, like, multiple times throw these into, like, oh, and that was a good pass from the future first rounder. And you're like, dude, come on. Like, what are we doing with that? Like, just stop it, because he's fine. I'm not saying anything bad about him, but, like, he's not this, like, clear cut, like, that dude's going to the league for sure. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
I will say, just to give Clemson a little credit, especially after week one with how bad the ACC looked outside of Miami, I do think Clemson's defense is better than any of the stat line shows, again, because they played Georgia and it's hard to really stop them for 4 quarters. But I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson's defense gave a lot of the ACC teams fits for the rest of the season.
I still think, just to hold true to my prediction, that they run the table on their side, Miami runs the table on their side, and they meet up. Undefeated in ACC play, Clemson will have the loss to Georgia in the ACC championship. We'll see how that plays out, but Clemson still controls their own fate. A lot of that is, like you're saying, help, because the ACC it's not a great division overall. Number 2 team in the land, Ohio State. My initial thought was another year of subpar quarterback play, because it didn't look stellar.
I thought Will Howard was going to do better. I mean, it's week 1. They played Akron. It was kind of one of those, like, there's really a lose-lose in those kinds of situations. Like, you got to come out and win by 70 like Ole Miss did. Otherwise, it's like, they don't look that good, or it's hard to get a good read. I think a lot of it was just kind of week 1 stuff. I think he's better than he showed. I will say Akron gave him, you know, the box score didn't show it, but, you know, just watching the game, like, Akron gave them a few fits. They had some struggles here and there, so they definitely need to get better.
Yeah. Third team, which another Big Ten team that I don't think they're going to fall into the same, like, hey, you know, they did what they needed to against Akron. Oregon against Idaho.
Yeah,
like
I mean, there's a reason that they dropped in the polls from 3. You know, when the new rankings came out. So, I think it was one of those, like, they kind of looked past them already. They just kind of came out and thought they were going to win. Watch the game. Like, Dan Lanning was just calling crazy plays. I mean, going for it on 4th and 9 and, you know, not kicking field goals when he should have. I think he was testing out a lot of stuff, I think, because he never really felt super threatened at any point during the game, even when it was kind of close. So, again, it's like one of those easy to give them a pass, but, like, if we weren't looking at these rankings going like, oh, they're the number 3 team in the nation, they got the W, they're fine, walk on. This is those things that would kind of maybe play into, like, oh, maybe they're not as good as we thought. Like, let's start watching them from here on out to see if they can turn it around.
Which they moved. Dylan Gabriel moved the ball well on Idaho. The problem was once they got on the opposite side of the field, they just stalled time and time again.
Couldn't get in the end zone.
Which is sort of very unlike Oregon. Yeah. Oregon, especially against those lower teams, you're almost like, hey, guys, can y'all not put up 100 points versus these guys? Like, it's week 1. Number 4 team, Texas. Thoughts?
Hard to get a read. They looked good, mainly just because Colorado State's pretty bad. But again, it was kind of one of those, like, they did what they should have done, and it was hard to really say whether they looked good or not, just because they were kind of just doing whatever they wanted to at that point.
Well, it goes back to I don't know what Colorado State has on offense. Like, did Texas's defense get better against the pass from last year? Because last year they were 126th in the nation. You sit back and you go, I don't know, which really goes into their game this week against Michigan. It's one of these ones where it's like, because we're going to talk about Michigan here in a minute. It's like Michigan didn't look great against Fresno, especially on offense. Like you talked about it, pick six really took the game over because of their defense. I sit back and I told our buddy who's a big Michigan fan, I was like, I think Michigan, based upon what we saw from Texas, is going to have to put up at least 30 to have a chance to win the game. But it's because of how good Texas' offense looked. I don't know what we're going to get because, like you said, it's week one. It's tough to get a good read. Fifth team, Bama. I will say it. I will take a line from your playbook. Milroe only threw 9 passes. Now, what I will tell you is from the offensive side, I didn't like what I saw. And what I mean by that is Milroe did not have this jump in play that I was expecting against a Western Kentucky team. Like, it's very similar to last year. Like, just because you went out and blew Western Kentucky does not mean that here in 3 weeks when Georgia comes to town that you're like, oh, we're going to get 63 points. It's like, no, based upon what I saw, Georgia's going to beat Alabama by double digits in Tuscaloosa in a few weeks in September. Like, that's what I'm seeing. The issue is like you said, it gets like covered up. Like you see the box score and you go, "Oh, Bama's who we thought they were."
63-0. Yeah, Bama's a dominant force. I don't know. We'll see. That game meant nothing. It means nothing. You can't tell.
Correct. 100%. You cannot tell. Ole Miss, same way.
I'll be honest. I didn't see that game. I was just that was one I just kept seeing. Touchdown alert, touchdown alert, touchdown alert. So I kind of knew how it was going.
Stop it. He's already dead. Poor Foreman.
Yeah. But I hope they got as much money as there's points were scored on them.
Oh, my goodness. Ole Miss, for me, the thing I sit back with Ole Miss is I was happy to see them come out and have a good warm-up. Like, that to me is important for Ole Miss because Ole Miss has some tough games. They have Georgia come to Ole Miss this year. And then the other big one for me is Ole Miss has to go down to LSU. Like, that, in my opinion, is just it's an extremely tough environment. It's something that Ole Miss is known for not ever being able to seal the deal and to be either in the contention, sort of as you said, of going to an SEC championship or just having one loss to, say, Georgia, but saying, hey, yes, we lost to Georgia. We beat everyone else. We got left out because Texas was one loss or something to Georgia, and they got put in. That's why we're out. We still deserve a playoff spot. It helps to start the season off strong, which Ole Miss did. Number 7, Notre Dame. I think we both had the same opinion of this game in terms of defense and offensive for both teams. What was your thoughts?
I thought the defense was pretty solid on both sides of the ball. Like, Notre Dame's defense is good, kind of regardless how you look at it. It helped that Wegman the game just looked too fast for him, especially there at the end. He had a couple good drives, but especially there at the end when the game was on the line. My man was just picking a target pre-snap and just going with it, and there was sometimes he was throwing the ball and there was no one even in the area. Like, it looked too fast for him, which I think also was a testament to Notre Dame's defense because they were making it difficult and they showed up when they needed to. Offensively, again, it was a little difficult to tell whether they were struggling on offense, which Notre Dame's never been really a big offensive powerhouse, but I do think that Texas A&M's defense was flying around and doing pretty well. So again, it's kind of one of those iron meeting iron, and it was difficult to really get a read on. It was just a good matchup. I thought it was a great game.
It was a great game. I think from both teams, on both sides of the football, especially on offense, Leonard for Notre Dame, Wegman for Texas A&M. At neither point did I see a quarterback that I was like, hey, I think that's the guy to get them over the hump. Now, I'm not saying this is more in terms of winning a national championship and beating said Georgia. I didn't see that out of those guys, and especially I didn't see it out of you just didn't see the explosiveness out of wide receivers in space because they would catch the ball. And I'm not saying they were just away from everyone, but they had 5 yards that was like, hey, you could make it your corner miss and get away and maybe create a big play. It was like you didn't see that. You saw that from the running game there at the end from Notre Dame, but throughout the game, it was more just sort of old school, like 5 yards at a time here and there. At no point, I can't even really remember a deep shot that went over 40 yards from either quarterback on offense. Like,
the good thing for Notre Dame is their schedule is soft.
oh my gosh,
I mean, they had to get through A&M. Starting off with a loss there would have really wrecked their season. But they got the win like they needed to. They're not in a conference, so that's probably going to play out well for them this year because they don't play anybody tough really until maybe Nebraska. I think they play.
And USC.
And then USC at the end of the season. So, I mean, everybody's talking about the Florida State, because they were number 10 when you're preseason looking at their schedule. But obviously that's a wash now. I mean, that should be an absolute walk of a game for them. So, honestly, like, even if they go through the entire season and lose to USC, which, again, I think that'd be a good game, but they could be an undefeated Notre Dame or a one-loss Notre Dame. They're in the playoffs.
They're in the playoffs if that plays out. Number 8, which is the surprise team, and I said this is probably their best chance to win the Big Ten, was Penn State. Like, you take a look at what you see out of Ohio State, what you see out of Michigan, Oregon. Outside of I wrote this down before USC played. Like, I sit back and look at that and I go, dude, Penn State looked the best that they've seen as compared to every other big team in a while.
Absolutely. For week 1. And I don't think West Virginia was like a slouch team either. Like the West Virginia played pretty well. Penn State definitely looked like the best big team again prior to USC beating LSU. Maybe even still after. Like I think that if you was like got to give a championship after week 1, Penn State's going to win the Big Ten in my mind. That's how I thought of it. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but you're right. Like from us kind of making fun of them, going like the 12-team playoff is perfect for them because they can lose to Michigan and Penn State and still make the playoff. They might end up proving us wrong, and they might end up fighting for that Big Ten championship anyway because they definitely did look the best.
Their biggest, I mean, they don't have to play Michigan this year. They have to go to USC at the beginning of October 12th. That's really their next biggest game. They get Bowling Green, Kent, Illinois, UCLA, then USC. They get Ohio State at home, and that's really it for Penn State. Like, it is really set up for them to have a chance to succeed because now it's, can you beat USC on the road? Can you get Ohio State at home and just finally get over the hump of, you don't have to beat both of them. You just really got to beat one of them.
Yeah, they're gonna have a good opportunity to have a couple good quality wins on their resume.
Speaking of Michigan, they were the number 9 team, and what I said was wolf. Offense is atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, defense wasn't good either. I mean, like if you look at it, they got the pick 6, they got a couple picks, but like outside the interceptions, which I know that's part of the game, but like Fresno State was driving on them. Like they were struggling on both sides of the ball against Fresno State. And like, that's not to like put Fresno State down, but Michigan probably scheduled this as like a warm-up game. You know what I mean? And like they did not look they honestly, I'll be honest, I said this, they look like the Michigan that I expected. Like they're fine, like they're better than a normal football team, but like I don't have them beating anybody big. Like they're going to lose to Texas. I think they're going to lose to USC. Like they're going to lose all the games that matter this year because again, they're not the championship caliber team that they had last year.
We'll see if the prediction comes true. I know that Michigan is right now a 7.5 point dog in that game. I think they lose by 21. Like, that's just the sense that I get from Michigan is I really think the offense is poor. It's not a great time to catch Texas as much as you said, like this was a warm-up game. Did they win? Yeah, it's better than being Florida State losing. But at the same time, I didn't see anything in the game that if I was a Michigan coach, like I'm sweating going into this game.
Again, I was watching the game and I'm like, dude, Fresno State's driving. Quinn Ewers is going to shred these dudes. Shred them. This is going to be like most of Quinn Ewers' Heisman reel is next week.
Oh, 100%. Speaking of, reels, number 10 team, reeling, Florida State. The best thing, I mean, there have been hundreds and hundreds of memes. The best one was it showed the Trail of Tears of the U.S. and it showed the Trail of Tears of Florida's flight path from Ireland back. That one had me in tears. But DJU, what's funny is that, or sad, you already talked about it with like, this is the guy that lost to Klubnik. Klubnik doesn't look good. He goes to the Pac-12, now the Pac-2 last year.
Two-pack.
Yeah, two-pack. And I think he got lost. Like, was Oregon State a good team? Yes and no. Like, they couldn't win the bigger games. But I think that people just didn't get to watch DJU, so it wasn't like, oh, he really improved. It was just, I don't really think people watched any of the games because it was on the Pac-12. Like, if then he comes in here and lost that entire defense, like, for as much hype as they had, dude, it's gone. Like, people, I've seen so many things of like Florida State fans going into the NCAA, sim to next season.
Yeah,
like,
dude, this is the kind of stuff that like it makes you question Mike Norvell, like. Because and I told you this, like, before last season, they're like, oh, Mike Norvell's coming in Florida State, and you're kind of like, I'll be honest, I didn't know who that was. Kind of just like, I don't know, is he a good coach? Right? And then he goes undefeated with them, and again, I thought they should have made the playoffs, and you're just like, okay, like, fine, household name, I got it, he's a good coach. And then this stuff kind of happens, and you're like, well, wait a second, did he just have like a Matt Nagy season? Did he just like get lucky or like be that new guy on the block that like people weren't expecting? And that's what got him by? I don't think so. But when you have stuff like this, it's like, dude, how do you go from an undefeated season to, like, what are we doing here? Like, what? Because you go, like, two things. Like, what did you see in DJU that made you bring him here, right? And if he really is that good that you saw that kind of stuff, what's happening with the coaches? Like, because you saw him playing for other coaches. And now all of a sudden he's under you as, and a coaching staff, and now he's terrible. Like, I don't know what the common denominator is. You know what I mean? Like, it makes you question, like, this is the kind of stuff though that will like put Mike Norvell on the hot seat. You know what I mean? Like,
the seat's on fire right now.
I mean, how far have you fallen? Like, that's crazy to me.
The going forward on fourth down to begin the second half, like, nothing summed up Florida State more than that play for me. It was like, hey, like, clearly, like, this team's like, yo, we got to do something. Like,
yeah, we're feeling it.
We're feeling it. Let's go for it. And then when we do go for it, DJ just throws it to the middle of nowhere and hits, it was like he's throwing it. Hey, Boston College guy, I just want to see how fast you are because your quarterback's fast. Let's see if you're fast too. And it was just one of those plays that the second you saw it, you're like, dude, this sums Florida State season right here. Like, this is ugly. And
all that being said, like, we know they lost their like main defensive guy, especially on the D line last year, but they were still touting this like, we're gonna still be good on defense. Dude, their defense is bad. I mean, I called it in the Georgia Tech game. It was like, I think it was in the second quarter. I texted y'all, and I was just like, this game is so weird. Because, again, in your mind, you're thinking, like, Florida State should clearly be better than Georgia Tech, which it looked like they were, like, the bigger, faster, stronger athletes. But you could, clear as day, Georgia Tech was the better team. And it wasn't just because they were winning, but it was like, dude, they look like a complete football team, and Florida State does not. And it was, like, very clear and obvious. And then, again, you kind of just, like, bad things happen, flukes happen, whatever. It's Boston College. And I made the joke of like, this is the competition between the like, how many transfers can you get in, with DJU and Billy O'Brien, because that guy's been everywhere. It's like, who's better at transferring? And Boston College was, again, clearly the better team, which, like, I don't know if I've ever uttered those words in my life. You know what I mean? So it was just... their season's over, dude. It's over. I know there's a lot of football, and that sounds dramatic, but, like, over, dude. Like, they just got to reset. They need to sim to next season and just start looking at something else.
100%. Like I said, just go ahead and sim forward to the
Breaking
next
news,
season.
DJU's in the transfer portal.
Yeah. Florida State has been eliminated from playoff contention. Number 11. I will throw 11 with 12 just because two teams that played lesser teams that I don't know where they're at. Mizzou and Utah, respectively. Did they come out and do what they needed to do? Yes. Have the bad news for Mizzou? They play in the SEC. Like, there's just a lot of good teams. The good news for Utah is like, I still think there's more better teams in the Big 12 than I think we initially thought. One of which we'll talk about here in a minute, of Arizona. Offense looked really, really good. There's some other schools in the Big 10 the Big 12 that I think will surprise some people this year. But overall, I sit back and I go, I just don't know what we got yet because it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, best thing that happened for Utah was that Cam Rising stayed healthy. So,
yeah. Number 13, LSU. The quarterback didn't look bad. Like, he wasn't Connor Wegman. It wasn't Jaden Daniels. But, I mean, Pop sent out the picture, which I was dying. Like, Brian Kelly's face the last 3 years, losing an opening week. And then him slamming his fist on the thing, I just sit back and I'll let you take it away with that because you got me laughing.
It was clearly like this facade of him just, I'm so mad, Come on, dude. No, we knew you were mad. Nobody thought you were happy to lose the game, but now you're, slamming your fist on the table like it feels faker than we thought it was now to begin with. But I'll give it to LSU that at least they're playing tough opponents to open the season every year. Like, that's more than what most big schools can say. You know what I mean? So it's tough that they're pulling a Buffalo Bills type thing here, but I was happy for it. I was not expecting USC to look as good as they did. Defense is light years ahead of what they had been. So, I think LSU will be fine. It's a tough loss. It really is. It's a really tough loss. Again, especially considering, USC was 23 ranked. Nobody was really giving them a whole lot of credit. If anything, though, because all of a sudden everybody's like, yo, USC's pretty good, this loss will continually look better on LSU's schedule. Like, as long as LSU can go out and compete in the SEC, if USC does really well in the Big Ten, this loss isn't going to look that bad for them.
Correct.
Because it was a great game, a fantastic game.
I'm going to talk more about USC later because they were the surprise darling of week 1. Number 14, Clemson. I know we've talked about them a little bit. I think anytime you're mentioned in the same graphic as a service academy, like, unless it's like, hey, salute to service or look at the rushing yards, like, it's probably not a good thing, and it wasn't because it was like people since 2018 with 0 transfers, athletes, and it's academies in Clemson.
Yeah.
Like,
and again, I think their defense is fine. So talk about their football team. Their defense is pretty good. It's going to give them fits. I think Clemson's going to be okay in the ACC because the ACC is bad. These are those kind of things, though, that like the media gets a hold of and like latches onto, and all anybody can talk about is Dabo's not touching the transfer portal. And I get it. He like wants to do the like traditional thing. He doesn't like the transfer portal. I get it. I don't like it. Kirby doesn't like it. Kirby's come out and publicly said he doesn't like it. He wants to do the traditional. There's been plenty of coaches that have come out and say, we want to do we recruit, we find the guy, we, schmooze and booze, and we get him to come to the team. That's what they want to do. But sorry, the rules have changed. And at the end of the day, you know who's making transfer portals and you know who's not making transfer portals? You know who's the number 1 team and you know who's now the number 22 team?
25 team.
25 team. Like, again, at the end of the day, what matters? Wins. You got to win, right? And you can stand on, we're not going to do that all you want. But at the end of the day, like, the people paying your paycheck are going to get tired of that. And they're going to say, you need either start doing this or, again, if you're winning football games, nobody's going to care. No one. If
they ain't winning games.
Yeah, if Clemson came out and won, they're not going to be like, yeah, you should have hit the transfer portal. They're going to be like, look, Dabo's doing exactly what it should have been. But when they're not hitting the transfer portal and everybody else is and everybody else winning and you're not, sorry, like, that's on you. And it's going to end up biting him if he doesn't fix it.
It's already bit him. Like, that's the blood has already started to flow. Like, it's clear because just like you talked about with Kirby, who's Kirby go get? Like, Kirby's had Saban's no longer in the building. You've got he's always been top 3 in recruiting, but they still go out and get ETN running back from Florida. It's like Georgia found a way that, hey, we have a player in a portal that we think makes our team better. We're going to go get him. Like, regardless, we understand it's a business. Like, is ETN trying to be like, I'm a Georgia guy? No. ETN wants to get with a team that's going to run the football to make it so his NFL stock's better. Plain and simple. Like, it maybe win a national championship. Like, I would argue that Mitchell, why did he leave Georgia after winning back-to-back national championships? It was, I want to go to Texas where they throw the ball more because I think it will help improve my NFL stock. That's why he left. Like, guys are making business decisions. Dabo is just making a terrible business decision right now because that's what it's about. He doesn't like NIL. He doesn't like the transfer portal, and it's killing him. But the problem is Dabo is like still stuck holding like Bernie Madoff stocks, being like, no, I think I think this is still good. Like, and he hasn't realized, like, dude, like, you're getting Ponzi'd right out of the league. Like, this like belief that you have, it doesn't win games.
If they hadn't had the 2 national championships from, the recent 10 years or whatever it was, he'd already be gone.
Correct.
Like that. And that's the sad part is like the only reason he's being kept is because he was good kind of in the old system. It's a new system. Like he either changes or he's going to be gone.
Yeah. Change or die. Number 15, Tennessee. I had quarterback looks great.
Looks great.
My question is they have a very young secondary. Where will it take them? They play NC State this week, which was supposed to sort of be a bigger game. I would argue it's not. For Tennessee, I think Tennessee's going to win pretty big. It's only an 8-point spread. I think they beat them easily by double that, and it's because NC State looked terrible against Western
Carolina.
We're losing. I still remember it was like NC State was like a 30-point, favorite, and you sent me a text and you're like, dude, it's tied at the half, and I was like, what?
We were down by 14 at one point or something like that.
Yeah, like I think Tennessee, the difficultness for Tennessee will be, hey, you got to play Bama, you got to play Georgia. Like, they still have to play some harder top 10 teams, like right now, in terms of, I'd still argue that regardless of how Bama looks at quarterback, they're still one of the better teams in the country just because of the talent that you have on the rest of the roster. It will be about, can Tennessee find a way to really sort of shield a young quarterback? Because at some point this season, no matter, every team at some point has to rely on their quarterback to win a game. Can the secondary, when that guy has because Stetson Bennett had bad games. He had one against Missouri.
Yeah.
Like, and what won him the game?
Defense. Yep. Mizzou had that game all game. Like, they had Georgia's number the whole game. It's just one of those nights that Georgia just wasn't clicking.
And Georgia's defense showed up when it needed to most, and they won them the game.
Yep.
Plain simple. Like, that's what Tennessee's defense will have to do. Heupel can coach an offense. It's just, can Heupel get the defense? Sort of what USC has. Like, and we'll get to them in a minute, but it's a good transition. I had 16 Oklahoma. I just did what they needed to. But I don't know where Oklahoma is because it's one of those games that you just don't know. Oklahoma State, for me, they handled their business against the reigning FCS championship in South Dakota State. Vegas was only giving them 10 points, which we were sitting back. We're like, dude, am I nuts? Or,
is this a trap?
Yeah. But I sit back and go, they handled their business and looked good doing it. Colorado didn't. Like, Colorado struggled against North Dakota State, and it's like, that to me is like the division between the two schools. It's like Oklahoma State knew, hey, this is a good football team. We got to come out and handle our business. And they did, and they looked good doing it.
Yeah, and again, I think South Dakota State scored a few points, but again, that's always been like Oklahoma State's effort. That's always been like the Big 12's MO. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to come out, we're going to try to put up 70 points and try to hold you under 60. That's kind of been the Big 12, which there's another team we'll talk about, Arizona. I think they're a great fit for the Big 12 because that's how they're going to play. They're going to let New Mexico score 30 points on them. We're just going to score 60.
Good luck keeping up.
Yeah, and I think I don't think it's going to like win a national championship. They're going to struggle. They it'll be competitive in the Big 12, but they like you said, they did exactly what they needed to do. They were exactly who we thought they were going to be.
Number 18 was Kansas State. Yet again, it's just a team that's like, I don't know. Just because they haven't played they play Tulane this week. And Tulane's a better school than like Western Pine Bluff of the Blind that most of these teams play. But it's one of those ones I don't have a good read on them. So
yeah, I got nothing to say there. It's the same.
Number 19, though, another sort of in the USC category that I felt a lot better about, but was a surprise for a lot of teams, Miami.
Dude, we're putting it on tape. I said it. Cam Ward is the dark horse Heisman this year, dude. He played out of his mind.
And looked good.
I know Florida was they're not that great, but that was one of those where it's like, is Florida really not that great, or is Cam Ward just balling out, dude? That he looked so good in that game.
Cam Ward was making throws in that game that I sit back and I go, look, if you look at Miami's schedule, they do not have a tough schedule.
Yeah.
They could easily go undefeated for the rest of the year, no problem. If they can do that and Cam Ward plays like he did, not only will I think Cam Ward be in serious contention for a Heisman, I think Cam Ward's draft stock will absolutely go through the roof.
I also think that Miami is going to just walk away with the ACC. Again, just based on what we saw and what happened, when you have I wouldn't say a super competitive team, but a team where it's dude, they might be sneaky and surprise people in the ACC because we're returning 21 starters in Virginia Tech, losing to Vanderbilt. I'm sorry, your conference is weak. The ACC is just in a bad spot right now, and Miami's going to walk away with it.
Since you bring him up, I do want you to say the point that you said about Vanderbilt. For as much as people hated the SEC.
Oh yeah, I always talk about how these teams, just because there's so many of them, the teams should get relegated. When you finish dead last in your conference, dude, you get relegated back to the FCS, and somebody else gets moved into let's make this more competitive. But Vanderbilt's always fun to keep around, especially in the SEC, because everybody talks about how they're the best conference. It's because if they lose, it's just yeah, whatever, they're Vanderbilt. Of course they lost. But when they win, dude, everybody's just oh my God, Vanderbilt won! This is amazing! SEC, it just means more, it's just that's what Vanderbilt does. It's just, it's great.
What's even better is for the opposing team, it's hey, you suck.
Yeah, dude.
There's no, you lost to Vanderbilt. No one sits back and it's not so much about Vanderbilt winning. It's you lost to Vanderbilt.
It's the two stories of the weekend. Dude, did you see how bad Florida State is? Bro, Vandy won a game. And it's Virginia Tech's just sitting there man, this game was supposed to be nothing. It's non-ranked. It was our warm-up game against an SEC opponent. Dude, we're catching more flack than Florida State is.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Number 20, A&M. I think we talked about them a fair amount. Quarterback, the biggest thing was, for as much hype as they put behind Wegman to come out, I was expecting to sort of see this, hey, this is the second coming of Johnny Manziel. This is the quarterback they've been looking for. And throughout that whole game, I was Texas A&M needs to start looking for a quarterback.
It's not it, yeah.
It's not it. Number 21 was Arizona, which, like you said, you had them. It was funny because you picked them after the prediction. You were hey, a team that we really didn't talk about that I think is going to be sneaky good is Arizona. Don't get me wrong, I get that they gave up 30 points to New Mexico, but that offense was clicking.
Yeah, and again, when I say sneaky good, I'm talking Big 12 specific. They're that, I already said it, they're that perfect Big 12 team of I don't think they're really going to be any national competitive type level. They could come out and win the Big 12. I wouldn't be shocked about that. But when they play whoever they end up playing in the 12-team playoff, that's going to be where it's going to be different. But I do think they're going to be sneaky good in the Big 12 because, again, they're going to score a lot of points on you. And I mean, that's the name of the game, right, is score more points than the opponent, and you can win games.
And it's the same for the number 22 team in Kansas. Both of those teams have it's such an interesting year for the Big 12 because they don't have to go through Oklahoma or Texas.
Yeah.
If you can win this division, you're buying yourself a seat in the college football playoff. And for Kansas, whoever it is, it will be a huge moment. It will be someone's first time ever getting into the college football playoff.
I think we talked about this too in the prediction. Like, it could be Kansas, it could be Arizona, it could be Oklahoma State, it could be Kansas State. I mean, like, there's a lot of teams there.
Utah.
Yeah, yeah. Utah, I think, is the front runner, but like, there's 5 teams there that like no other conference really has that many guys or teams that are like could legitimately win.
And then number 23, USC.
Fight on, baby.
Defense looked fantastic. Like
I'm more surprised than anybody. Like I'm really glad. Like, Lincoln Riley saved his job. Like, as long as we can just do that every year or every game, I mean, like, that saved his job. It's very unfortunate that we couldn't have half of that when you had the Heisman Trophy winner and, returner, because we would have probably been competing for a natty if we could have just stopped anybody. But back into this year, I mean, like, light years ahead of, but we couldn't stop an FCS team. Like, Tulane put up 50 points on us, and we stopped a decent LSU team multiple times. I mean, like, that alone, you talked about it, the physicality that we brought and the non-missed tackles. Like, that was one of our big faults from the last 2 seasons, is like, we would get guys there because we had athletes, but then just missed tackles, and then there wasn't the gang tackling. We had all of that on Sunday. It was fantastic.
One of the biggest things I've heard about the schools that went from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten was the lack of physicality and we talked about, like, can these lines hold up to play?
Yeah, it was one of our biggest knocks on Oregon.
Dude, if anything comes out of week 1 is that USC put the Big Ten on notice, because we know that LSU in the trenches has bigger guys. Like, and dude, we watched the game again when you came over. It's like, dude, USC was throwing hats. Like, corner safeties, that dude that is a middle linebacker, but he's
Eric Gentry,
6'6",
215.
He looks like a strong safety coming out of the box, but it's like, no, that man's a middle linebacker. But it's like, all of those dudes hit, and the gang tackled. Like, and there were so many plays that you were calling out when we were watching the game again that you were like, last year that was a touchdown. Like, they couldn't make that tackle in space, and he was gone. USC was doing the things that you hope they did for the past 2 years. Finally got it on paper, and we're doing. For me, right now, like, I don't care who you are, Michigan and Penn State better buckle it up, because if USC can play like that, they're going to compete for the Big Ten championship game.
I mean, and I'll be the first to say that I was not a Miller Moss believer. He played great in that Louisville game, in the bowl game that didn't matter. He threw like 6 touchdowns, and everybody was like, oh, Caleb Williams, who? And it was like, yeah, there's a reason Lincoln Riley was like immediately in the portal trying to find a quarterback, right? And then he couldn't find a quarterback, couldn't get one to transfer, and then they were like, oh, no, it's because Miller Moss is our guy. And you're like, yeah, we'll see. He played really well. He did really well. Definitely, I hope he develops a little more. There were plenty of times he is shorter, so there were plenty of balls that got batted down that, like, the dude was wide open on the backside, probably was scoring a touchdown, and the ball gets batted down. If we want to be that big time competing for a natty or, a CFP spot, those plays need to be made. Like, those are the plays that get you over the hump and get you into the winning circle of the game that need to be made. We also kind of got bailed out on some fantastic wide receiver play. So he played great. I'm not knocking him at all, but I do hope he develops a little bit more just to make that. Because, I mean, Lincoln Riley is again, saved his job.
Quarterback whisperer.
Yeah, he's going to make you – those couple 2 final drives, I mean, that was all Lincoln Riley. Like, Miller Moss executed perfectly, but you have to know it's because – the quarterback whisperer is in your ear, calming you down, telling you exactly what to do, and he can run an offense. We've never said that he couldn't. Lincoln Riley is one of the best offensive coordinators we've ever seen. He's going to make us score points. So now the fact that we just have a defense, dude, I'm excited about the season.
I really didn't even think about what you just said until now, the fact that Lincoln Riley can talk to him up until 15 seconds of the play clock, like, dude, that you have the guy that it's like, hey,
who else would you want if you said you can pick one guy who can talk to your quarterback for all the way up until 15 seconds?
There's only one other name.
Lane Kiffin.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. And if those two, but that's what it takes, in my opinion, to beat a Georgia. Hey, do you see this coming? Yeah, Kirby's talking to his guy, but I know what Kirby's about to do. This is what you need to do. This is where you need to look. Like, that type of communication, it's under talked about right now, but I think as the season goes on, we'll start to see, like, hey,
it's going to be an advantage for us, for sure.
It's a big advantage for the coaches that really have strong offensive coordinators.
As our buddy Slam, I'm ready to be hurt again.
Oh, my gosh.
Put it on the board, baby. We're back. I'm ready to be hurt.
Number 2014 was NC State. I said another year of mediocre ACC play, like, for them. Like, they've always been that sort of like a Texas A&M. Like, I feel like every year NC State's like, no, this is our year. Like, we're going to be a good team. And then halfway through the season, like, they'll beat some teams they shouldn't beat, and then they'll lose to some teams that they have no business losing.
Yeah, you kind of talked about it. I've talked about this. They're a perfect example of, like, would this Tennessee game really mean as much as we think it's about to mean if North Carolina State didn't have the number 24 in front of their name? I don't think so, right?
Correct.
And, like, because they struggled against Western Carolina, they're going to come in and you're expecting them to get beat pretty bad by Tennessee, right? And again, you used to talk about, like, once you get outside the top 10 or maybe even top 15, you're kind of like, those numbers don't matter. Like, now it's just like we're just throwing things out there so we can say we played a ranked opponent, right?
Yes.
NC State's like a perfect example of that. I don't think they're a bad team. They can show up and beat people, like you said, but right now, again, the ACC is just in a bad spot. Like, I think they're just going to be a statistic at the end of the season.
Correct. And then the final team, death, taxes. Iowa doesn't have an offense.
Iowa football, yeah.
Which, surprisingly, in the first half, we were like, oh, this is Iowa we expected.
It was 3-0 at the end of the first quarter and 6-0 at the half.
You're like, the punters get some work again today.
And it turned out 40-0. Like, where did that come from?
And I sit back, I look at Iowa, and this is why I had Iowa in the playoff, is because I know that Iowa will have a defense. It's sort of like if you flip a coin enough times, like, I don't care how many times it hits heads, eventually it's going to hit tails. Like, eventually Iowa will have some sort of offense. I'm not saying a good offense, but they'll just have something where it's not 6-0 at the end of the game and you're like, whoo, barn burner. Like, is it this year? I don't know. Like, this week will be a good week because they play Iowa State, and like you said, we've talked about it a lot. Anytime you play a rival, like, it's hats off.
Things happen, yeah.
Craziness happens. Iron Bowl, living proof. The game with Michigan, Ohio State, things just happen in those games that you're like, God, like, it goes back and forth. We'll see. But that was week one. It was a good week one. I'm glad college football's back. But right now, for me, just to end it, it's Georgia and it's still everybody else. I think until someone or Georgia shows that, hey, they're really, really vulnerable, it's just tough to knock them. It's sort of like the Chiefs in the NFL. Until someone beats them, it's hard to.
And honestly, like, this is kind of one of the best seasons to do it. I'm knocking the SEC for this, but at the same time, like, this is everybody in the SEC plays Georgia. Georgia plays everybody, but everybody else doesn't play everybody else. Like, I think there's only two teams that play Georgia and Bama. I think it's Ole Miss and Tennessee.
Ole Miss does not. It's Tennessee, and I think it's Auburn.
So, again, like, Texas, and, Texas plays Georgia, but, like, Texas doesn't play, Alabama or any of those. So, like, there's going to be a lot of, I think, like, 10-2, 11-1 type teams, but they all are going to have one loss to Georgia. So, like you said, Georgia's going to run a gauntlet, and it's going to either expose weaknesses or just confirm the fact that, like, it's everybody else, and then there's Georgia. Which, again, if you made me pick, I'm in the latter of the camp of just, like, what I saw against Clemson, even though I said they do look beatable, there were just some plays that like weren't even fantastic plays, but it's just like, dude, the discipline that Kirby has those dudes in. I mean, like they're running like double, triple reverse, and like the D end or like the outside linebacker is just sitting on the backside waiting for the guy to come to him because he knows that's his read. And sure enough, there it is, and boom, he makes that tackle. And you're like, that's the only team that makes that play because everybody else chases and follows and does whatever. Like their team was just, again, it was better coaching, better discipline, better players. Like that's what it comes down to.
Special teams, special players, special plays. But outside of that, anything else?
That's it.
Cool. Well, thanks for week 1. We'll come back week 2.